everybody, and welcome to my first ever attempt at participating in NoWriMo alongside Kayla. For those of you who don't know what that is a writing challenge that is quite popular throughout the writing community, where you try and write a minimum of 50,000 words. Obviously, with the new backdrop and things along those lines, you can tell I'm recording this intro after everything is done, because I need to let you know we've made a bit of a last-minute shift to the video. That was the text that got in the way. That is because we have made a last-minute shift to the video where we are actually including a bunch of parts that were originally supposed to be exclusive to Patreon in the public version, because we realized with those chunks ripped on out, the video wasn't really justified in existing. So now those parts are available for everybody, and hey, you're gonna get bonus content. To my patrons, I'll be releasing a bonus video exclusive to you next month to make up for that. So thank you for being understanding. I really do appreciate it. We're gonna be on vacation this next week, so you're gonna be getting a couple backlog videos before we jump on into the new orientation for the channel of being more back to basics with book reviews and news forefront. Love that. But now, a very themely transition into today's themely sponsor. Campfire's coming in hot for Christmas. It says right here, it comes in. Tone it down, tone it down. Let's tone it down a little bit. Every time this little old bell rings, a subscriber checks out Campfire. And every who down in Whoville, big and small, was singing the praises of Campfire, the best writing platform of them all. I'm not taking the costume off. You can't take the costume off me. I won't let that happen. Okay, I'm gonna buckle down and serious up, because Campfire is genuinely something people should be paying attention to right now, especially if you're a writer or someone who uses, let's say, some monopolist competitors, because Campfire has officially launched their platform that's going to allow you to support authors in greater and more direct ways while not supporting other certain companies that suck butt. Campfire has just had their first wave of authors monetize their stories on the platform. Each story includes at least one free chapter, and if you decide you'd like to keep reading once you reach the end of the free section, you can purchase either the standard ebook format or the complete package with exclusive bonus content like behind-the-scenes lore, details on more creatures in the world, or additional short stories depending on what the author has provided. This whole concept is in addition to the services Campfire already provides. You can save stories to your bookshelf with custom collections and join a community where you'll support authors with higher royalties than anywhere else in the industry. Campfire is run by people who understand and feel the effects of what is currently going on in the publishing industry. It's already so hard to get your foot in the door, and the current returns are far from ideal. But at Campfire, they're putting the power in the author's hands and making sure those authors are fairly compensated while giving you additional content from those same authors. So head on over to Campfire to see the 30+ stories they just added to their platform, and find your next great read at Campfire. Hello, and welcome to my first ever contributions to NoWriMo, which is a writing tradition here in the online book community, where people in the month of November do their best to get, I believe, 50,000 words written. And Kayla had the brilliant, wonderful, spectacular idea of me joining in that as I write more and more of my Goblin defense attorney book, where a goblin is forced to defend a dark lord. But there is a series of questions I will be answering, most of which for everyone, some of which for just patrons, about what I'm writing, what inspired me, and things along those lines. I've shared a lot about my writing experiences before, and like the business side and like the marketing angles, but I haven't ever gotten into like the creative developmental angle for videos, at least not that I can remember. So this will be really interesting. Let's see if I can manage. Share whatever amount you'd like about your story content. Where, what inspired you for this story? So there's a few different things. I made it well known for Neon Ghost of Witch's Sin. I was inspired by a mixture of like Buffy, Dresden Files, and Cyberpunk 2077. For the Goblin Defense Attorney, I had a mixture of, I watched Better Call Saul a couple of years ago, which I thought was just brilliant. From beginning to end, almost as good as Breaking Bad, and I just decided like, okay, let's roll with something along those lines, but make it fantastical. And I wanted something that would be like really morally challenging for a really good veteran defense attorney. How could there be a world where a Dark Lord can be brought before a court? And I decided to settle on what is an early 2000s version of New York. Like, it's called New York. There are references to real world bands and stuff like that. But the big difference is not just humans. There's elves, dwarves, tieflings, the whole smorgasbord of fantasy creatures occupying this early 2000s New York. Like, people have flip phones and stuff. And at the same time, with this really exciting time that was my childhood, the emergence of this form of technology. But that pivot, I figured, to be a really interesting point to ask the question, can tech go beyond the ultimate evil magic? So there is a Dark Lord there's a whole lot of Dark Lords actually who operate as like mob families. I decided to make them like an Al Capone equivalent, who have been operating within this society like a mob family. And finally, the government feels they have enough tech, they have enough weaponry to possibly hold these people accountable. And then our veteran goblin defense attorney is about to retire, and wouldn't you know it, one last case. And that one last case would be truly testing his personal ideology, because I wanted a protagonist who, very core to their nature and very important to them to believe that, yes, every person, no matter who they are, does deserve legal representation. So that is the groundwork for the story I'm building, and what I'm really, really excited for, because it's been conducive to not only what I find to be a really playful and fun world to write in, but I've been told the weakest part of my writing, and something I want to improve on, is dialogue and prose of a more like realistic nature, prose that really pull people into the story deeper. And I feel like for this book to work, I have to improve on that. So I'm writing this book now as essentially a challenge to myself to write the best book with my weaknesses improving that I can. So I'm planning to take it slow. I'm planning to really fine-tune my process and try and improve on that specific level. So whoopity-doo-dah, next question. So next up, for the next question that's not Patreon exclusive, we have word count. Share daily amounts too, if you know. I'm at 15,728 words. What did you tackle this week in your story? So I haven't had too much time to write, as I said, but instead I have this ever-growing notes page in my notes app. And then I also came up with the ending. Speaking of things I'm not going to write for a long time, I know the final scene, and it's going to be something that's very bringing it all full circle, to keep it vague. So I was really happy when that occurred to me. I know exactly how this book should end. This is for Patreon only, so get out of here, you non-patrons, you gross little cootie havers. Can you share something that is going on in the story at this time? At this time, there is a whole family, as I mentioned. There's a crime family that is the stand-in for the Dark Lords, and Will is going to meet with his client's sister. And he goes in, again, a little too confident, a little too sure in himself. He's a veteran. He thinks he's seen it all. And he forgets that the sister of a Dark Lord is still a Dark Lord, or a Dark Lady. And so he ends up getting played with in a way that he is not going to become aware of for quite some time. And that's been fun to weave into the scene, to have it in dialogue be something where Will walks away like, that was kind of a waste of my time. But for the reader, hopefully, and the person who just played him, you pick up on just how big of a mistake he made. What are some key things about your book you hope your audience will like? I think it's pretty unorthodox. I think my book is really something strange to go high fantasy legal drama. And I'm hoping that like bringing magic into a courtroom as evidence, and how that can be very difficult to write, believe it or not, will be something people really enjoy. Are there any points of your story you are curious or nervous to get the audience's reaction to? Everything legal drama in the courtroom wise, like no question. Are you kidding me? There's going to be some lawyer who reads my book and sends me a message about everything that would not work, to which my response is, yeah, there's magic, relax. But I hope it is close enough that like if Legal Eagle did one of his like rating reviews of it, I'd get like a B. I know I can make people who read my books and like them happy. I want to make someone who never wrote one of my books, who picked it up because they hear it's a fantasy legal drama and they're a lawyer, happy. I want them to read it and go, that was good. Were there any moments of brain blockage, distraction, writer's block? That not writer's block, thankfully, so far, but the big source of distraction for me is you all. I still have to make YouTube videos, which I love doing. This is my main job right now, and this is more of a side hobby that I incorporate into my job. So I have my biggest distraction is going to be getting you guys the content that you deserve, because you all allow me to live this life, and I don't ever want to abandon you. And I've already slowed down the content appear here on the channel, which everyone's been so appreciative of, to focus on like larger projects. I'm about to kick off the second part of the Fringe project here, which everyone who's watching this who is trying to write a book and working a full-time job, you get it. I can't believe I used to do this job and work as a software engineer, so I can't imagine what it's like to have a full 9-to-5 that's not as flexible as my current one and try to write a book. It's insane. People who manage to accomplish that, how? And I think that's the last of the questions, correct? Thank you so much. That's been my check-in. And now we're going to cut to Kayla. Kayla!
All right, hello patrons. Thank you so much for coming and checking out this version. So I got a couple questions here that we figured we'd start the video off with. So basically, to go into my story and talking about the overarching idea, I am planning to do kind of an epic fantasy, but this is going to be focusing a lot more, instead of having a traditional antagonist of like a Dark Lord or a, you know, evildoer, Voldemort-y, Sauron type. I'm going more into existentialism and forces of nature, because I think that's really cool, and I think there's so much magic, in the world already when it comes to space and science and things that we don't really know. So I thought it would be fun to play on that topic, since it's always interested me ever since I was a kid. So my story is taking place in a world that is slowly disintegrating into a lack of existence. And the reason I thought this was kind of an interesting take on this is versus the kind of death versus life magic, kind of tropes and things that we play on, like a Grim Reaper versus humans. I thought, to me, what is more terrifying than death? And to me, that's like a lack of existence altogether. Instead of having death being the ultimate antagonizing force, what about if this was just a general cycle that we all are believing in, and what if you're removed from that cycle? What if you never again will get to experience any form of consciousness, of rebirth into anything, even if you don't remember your past lives? Like, just knowing the fact that this is it, this is the end, you will not exist anymore. That to me gave me like a little goosebumps, thinking, ooh, that could be something fun to play with, and a different way to approach kind of death as a character in a story. I don't want death to be this kind of Reaper-like thing. I'm really excited to show you what my plans are for what a kind of death-like characters will be. This is Kayla from the future, inserting here back in the Patreon vlog comment stuff. So I forgot to mention about this story here, very important for the rest of the questions I'm going to answer in this video. One of the big things, though, that's going on with this world that has detached from the normal life cycle, everyone who lives there has some affinity or ability to kind of cross through these boundary lines into what I am not going to tell you the name, but there is a region just on the fringes of existence. They have somehow the ability to get there, so they are trying to ferry their souls of the dead ones through this treacherous landscape in order to be re-entered into the cycle of existence. I promise there is a lot of detail that goes into that, but that's going to be my fast version of it. You know, this landscape is very treacherous because the universe kind of is unraveling there where existence and non-existence meet. So there's a lot of things that can go wrong. So that is a key driving factor. Everyone has this ability, but not everyone wants it or would be willing to use it because it's so scary. But then they're faced with the realization that if nobody uses it, they're all just going to cease to exist. So it kind of puts you in this pressured situation of somebody's got to volunteer to do it. But yeah, so I guess I should go into a bit more about the inspiration, because I think that will explain more about what the book is overall. My inspiration for this came from a documentary I watched, as well as my love of space. I have Loved space since I was a kid. I wanted to be an astronaut, found out there was a lot of math in there, decided to give that up real quickly. But the interest and the fascination has always been there. But also there was a great documentary called About the Truth About Infinity, where we talk about infinity as a concept. So, starting with, is infinity large or small, basic things like that. What does infinity look like to you? And they bring about all these different people, mathematicians, astrophysicists, professors, just people from all different backgrounds to discuss this concept of infinity. And one of the cool things that I really enjoyed about it, we can kind of predict things, but there is this lack of knowledge that we will always have about it. And that's because it's just beyond our comprehension. And so I thought to myself, how cool would it be to face in a fantasy setting something that is completely and utterly beyond your comprehension? I'm having a lot of fun with that. So basically what's going on right now is my character is living in this world, and something has happened that has detached her world from the regular cycle. And she and everyone and everything in it is just slowly disintegrating. Like, it's slowly being enveloped. If any of you have seen Annihilation, that kind of shimmering sort of thing is what I got the inspiration for there. My character is really struggling with the fact that how can you leave a lasting impact on the world or feel like you've done something meaningful and impactful for the world when your world will undoubtedly no longer exist? And just kind of grappling with that feeling of, I want to do something that's worthwhile and meaningful, but yet there's this fighting sense of futility about your future and the knowledge that eventually it'll all come to an end. I'm really excited because it's not going to be a story of just life is pointless. There is going to be finding meaning in things. And I don't know, I guess I don't want to decide for you how you can interpret that, but I'm hoping you walk away with it with the same positive, thought-provoking kind of sense that I'm hoping to convey. I was very inspired by a lot of the places that I have lived or been abroad. So different cities will be based off of different places I have lived or spent time in. One of the main ones will be when I lived in Russia, in St. Petersburg. Another will obviously be Korea when I was in Seoul. And then a few others have been inspired by places I've been to, like Budapest, and also the time I spent in Myanmar, and I really enjoyed that. So there's going to be a lot of different influences from places I've physically been, and I hope that because this is a world that is meant to have a collection of the surviving world slowly condensing together. So I hope I'll do it justice. I definitely am doing my research on it, but that's kind of the inspiration for it. So yeah. Okay. Let's go back into the weekly questions that will be on the main channel too. Okay, dinner's out of the oven. I'm letting the steaks rest. We're good. The first question I had for us was the word count. Now that I have finished this week's check-in, I finished my chapter 2. Ended it at 7,193, which brought my grand total to 20,473. Yeah, something like that. What did you tackle this week in your story? For chapters, like pages, sections, what'd you do? So for this one, I had primarily tackled my chapter 2. And then I went back through my prologue in chapter 1, just going through some of the notes that Daniel had left in the comments. I have a thing where I will hand him my writing and he will comment on it and critique it, as I hope and expect him to do. And then I won't look at those comments for a while. I will get too wrapped up in my own head and start editing rather than continuing on with the story as I should. So I hand it off and then I just start outlining my next chapter. I have the overall skeleton outline of the whole story, but then I like to kind of detail to outline each chapter. And I will go through that and I'll start writing that. And usually about giving it a week and a half separation, I'll go back and read some of the other stuff. Now, this one is for Patreon only. Hello again. And I made the question, can you share something that is going on in the story at this time? I know I'm starting here in the chapter 2. I think that might be better than telling you what went on in the prologue or chapter 1. I'm just going to shove you in a scene. And now chapter 2, I've been using to really divulge a lot of information about what is going on in terms of the societal kind of political sphere. The reason this is so important about this setup here of what's going on in society is that there are definitely people who believe that this ending of the world is natural and should be as it is and should just accept it. But then there are obviously other people who are like, we have suddenly developed this weird ability we have no idea how to use. We are barely getting by right now. We could help these people get through here. We're able to study it, navigate it, and be able to ferry souls through. But it also has a lot of ramifications. And so there are a lot of people who think, hey, you're kind of going against the natural order here. And that's kind of the tension that I'm wanting to play with. What are the key things in life that make you want to keep on living despite all its hardships? And we're back to the main video. So number 3 is, what are some key things about your book you hope your audience will like? I hope that they will like not having this very direct evil bad guy kind of thing that I've always grown up loving stories about that. You know, I was a huge Lord of the Rings kid. Obviously, I grew up in the era of Harry Potter. I've always had kind of a figure or a, you know, organization a la Hunger Games, you know, where you can direct your hatred towards that character in the series. But I really like the idea of playing with what if it's just nature? What if it's just something you don't know and it's just happening? That sucks. Deal with it. Number 4 says, are there any points of your story you are curious or nervous to get the audience's reaction to? Yeah, definitely. Just the overall kind of like setup of this world that I'm building. There are a lot of different multiverse, you know, Cosmerian level authors and stories out there. So I know building one is always a fun challenge and a joy, but you want to make sure you do it well so you can showcase how the setting in this one place here isn't limited to just this story, that there's so much more to expand on and play off of. So I hope that kind of comes through. I'm a little nervous about that. Number 5 says, were there any moments of brain blockage, distraction, writer's block, and what parts? Yeah. So I'm very fortunate to be employed by my own partner. But I do handle a lot of stuff here on this end regarding administrative tax work, but also in terms of any of the merch, which the merch probably has already gone live. It should have. I hope it did. If not, maybe I'll bleep this out. I don't know. So, yeah, that is basically my big thing. And hopefully next week, since we finished chapter 2 and I'm all ready for chapter 3, we will have less brain blockage. I will see you then.
Okay, so it's time for our weekly catch-up. I don't think I've written too much, but I had the best writing brain blast of my entire life. It's almost 11 p.m. I took an edible. Let's talk NaNoWriMo. I'm going to answer the questions here. Word count, if you know daily amounts, share. I don't. I actually think I'm in the negative because I've been editing a whole bunch, and sometimes when you edit, you take like a lot of words where you got a concept across, and you're like, bloop, I can do that in about 2 sentences. And so because it's been editing, I'm actually really proud of this. I'm okay with saying this. I'm in the negative, but in like a really good way. I turned bad words into good words. What did you tackle this week in your story? So pretty much entirely editing. I rewrote from like chapter 1 to the end of chapter 3. Everything. Like it's really different now. I kind of have the whole story still formulating in my brain a little bit, so going back and changing up the foundation at the very start has allowed my mind to kind of like figure out where the story's gonna go and how it's gonna end. And this is with the Patreons only. If you're not a Patreon and you're seeing this, how? Can you share something that is going on in the story at this time? So, the Goblin Attorney and his paralegal are at a police station interviewing their client, the Dark Lord in this story. And this is actually what my brain blast was related to, because I was like, oh, I'm really having a hard time finding the voice of that character. Should they be like? What should their personality be? Writing a Dark Lord that's supposed to be like super actually personified and present in the text is really difficult. Because like, I don't know, what does Sauron do on a Tuesday? Is he mad when the mail's late? Or does he not care because he's got big Dark Lord stuff to do? Or is he mad because the mail's not arrived when it should and he's a Dark Lord? It should be there. That's what you gotta figure out. And so tonight, I really focused on that. talk about your approach to your writing this past week, this book. Like a blitz in a football field game thing, where it's like hike and I just try and tackle what has occurred to me in that moment as aggressively as I can to just get it down and in the book, so I can just feel super present in the text I'm writing. And it's allowed me to kind of get those like first thoughts out to get a scene structured, and then go through and just like completely chop it up from start to finish and turn the ingredients into a meal. Was there something you researched or something you found you needed to research? My search history right now is the most incriminating it's ever looked, because not only have I had to Google like the entire arrest process, how someone is like gotten a warrant for, put in prison, you know, when they first get appearing before a judge, but I'm having to do it from the perspective of a defense attorney. So it's like, okay, what does a defense attorney do when they're first showing up to represent their client? What does police corruption in the case look like? Because you're betting your butt I'm putting a whole thing in there about like, it's a dark lord, why are we giving him a trial? Cops don't want to go through the process, they want to having that in your search history, it feels very wrong. If there were moments of brain blockage, distraction, or writer's block. Yes, but I finally pushed through them. The entire problem I was having and why I needed to stay focused in these first 3 chapters, and I feel like I couldn't move forward with the story, is because I needed to find that voice for a very prominent character, the Dark Lord. And I kind of went for it first, like this more passionate and maybe kind of zany voice that was similar to like Matthew McConaughey in True Detective.
Look, I'd consider myself a realist, all right? But in philosophical terms, I'm what's called a pessimist.
And then I kind of pulled it more into like a mobster type area.
Do you remember one thing an issue better hear?
But that didn't really work either. And then I was scrolling on Reddit because I am a piece of trash. And there was this interview with a criminal from like back in the 50s. And he had this incredibly flat and detached way of talking. But there was something so sinister in it. It was like a lifelong psychopath who just had like no inflection when talking about his crimes or the thing he did.
You were using a gun.
Right.
And you met some fellas in a bar.
That's right.
And I was like, that's the voice I need. I need someone that feels distant from the moment. Someone that's actually the opposite of me writing this moment. They're beyond it. They've been alive for millennia. Why would they be passionate about this moment, this instant right here? And I also enjoyed the way the person was physically talking, like from the 50s, where they super enunciate their words and kind of have this like drawn out, careful, consider it before you let that go way of speaking. And that voice actually ended up informing the personality of this character I want to have like through the rest of the book. It's the first time I've ever had a voice be found to then inform the character. Usually it's kind of the other way for me, and it felt great. I love that. And that is my NoWriMo meeting of week 2. Now cut to Kayla.
Hi, so I am back for week 2. So for the usual thing to start off with is word count. Not all of these are going into my final word count because some of them are outline stuff, but I'll give you the totals here. So Tuesday, I did 3,266 words for just my chapter 3 outline. And then Thursday, I actually started writing the chapter 3 and I got to 2,643 words. And then the next day, we ended up going down to New York. So I got about 642 words of outlining chapter 4 in the car just to kind of be productive. Then yeah, we ended up totaling about 23,809 words here for my second week. And I'm fine with that, honestly. It was busy and just being able to get that amount down feels okay with me. What did you tackle this week in your story? Chapters, pages, sections, etc. Well, like I said, I focused on getting my chapter 3 outline done first. And then in terms of the writing itself, I will just insert random lines of just blank line where I'll be like, I'm going to fill that with something there, or I'm going to think of a word that I want to put there. I don't remember the word right now, but I'll come back to it. And so there will just be these long lines of just blanks in my document. So I focused on writing and connecting things. And then finally the chapter 4 outline, just to kind of utilize my time wisely. So, okay, for patrons, hello patrons. This week, the thing that I can share with you about going on in the story, the key thing that's going on now is we are finally being introduced to seeing the magic system and this other place that they have access to. You got a glimpse of it in the prologue, but you saw the very negative, horrific, disastrous impacts of it. Now I am kind of showing the whole kind of necessity of it in a way, like how they utilize it, how they've managed to learn about it, what they've managed to learn. It's not like they have all the answers. It's just, here's what we know so far, and here's how we learned to figure it out. What is this? I want to understand how this works. I want to understand the science behind it. I want to understand it, maybe if there's a way we can stop that. But it's coming down to people who are like, we don't have time for that. We don't have that luxury. And you're utilizing our resources to do these operations that aren't saving people in that time the way that their unit is used to doing. Whereas the other team is just kind of like, you're focusing on saving small clusters of people at a time. We're trying to save the entire world here by hopefully stopping. So it's just a nice kind of conflict in my head here that I'm trying to bring forth of like, both of them sound like reasonable things when you're put in these situations, and it's kind of hard to choose which you should value more. Number 3, back to the normal questions. Talk about your approach to your writing this past week. My approach to it. Okay, so I follow Shaylin Writes on YouTube, another content creator, and they are wonderful. And they put out a video recently which was focusing on clarity. They had this really great saying where clear prose is invisible. You don't really think about it. So when you're immersed in a story, some people might be able to say like, oh, that's a really great line, or oh, that was really impactful. But a lot of times people will just be so immersed in soaking up the story from start to finish, you don't really think, wow, that was conveyed so clearly in the middle of reading it. And that to me is just really great writing. It doesn't take you out. You aren't suddenly shocked out of the story by focusing on structure or exposition dumps or anything like too overly purple or artistic. A lot of mistakes can happen when someone like myself, who errs more on the artistic side, I love playing with imagery and descriptions. So it's really important for me to make sure that the descriptions I'm conveying are necessary for the plot, whether it's something that the character is dealing with in that moment or leading up to in that chapter, so it applies. Like I don't want to dump things in there for the sake of just like sharing about the world. It has to be like kind of related to what's going on. But in the same way, I want to make sure that it's clear and understood, so that way when I get feedback on it, the feedback is focusing on tailoring to whatever the minute causes are in there. If Daniel or another reader who's looking at my work doesn't understand a key concept because I didn't explain it clearly, they might not know to say, hey, this point wasn't explained clear enough to me, and therefore I don't understand all these other things. I try to think to myself, all right, what is the most necessary thing about this for them to understand, and how can I just clearly state that? And then add my artistic flair to it for other things. But I want to make sure the most important parts are just clear and concise and understood. So that's kind of been my approach. I hope that made sense. Honestly, I feel like I'm not making sense. Number 4, was there something you researched or something you found you need to research during this time? Anachronisms. Yeah, that would be my big one. So for example, I wanted to use the term greenlight, like if somebody greenlit something. And all of a sudden I thought to myself, geez, okay, so this is taking place in a fantasy world, yes. But in terms of like where I'm picturing it, it's very like 1930s inspired. And so I'm like, green light doesn't, is it referring to stop and go lights, or is it referring to something else? When would that term be coined? It feels like it might be out of place here. But it turns out it was actually in the early 1800s for railroad tracks, which seems obvious. I feel like I should have known that, but I didn't, and that was really good. And then finally, number 5, were there moments of brain blockage, distraction, writer's block, etc., and what parts? What's been the issue is it's been a busy November. We finally have gotten some money to be able to build furniture and put things in our house, which has been great. We had friends who we were hosting, and it was wonderful. And we went down to New York to visit another content creator. Hi, Sam. And that was awesome. But again, it's just like taking out time from when I would normally be writing. It's been busy. And I just feel like I have really kind of hit this point where I've been wanting to write, but I just didn't carve out the time for it. Yeah, 23,000 words for this week is fine, but I don't know. I expected a bit more. So that is the goal, and that is where we are. And I hope all of you are doing great, and I will see you next week. Alright, hello everybody. Okay, so first up is word count, and I can say with full honesty that while I did have a lot of things going on over the holidays like everybody else, I did manage to get out 10,599 words, which is great. I feel great about that. So we're currently at a total for 33,766. So yay! Number 2, what parts did you tackle? So this one here had been finishing chapter 3 and then progressing into chapter 4. I'm really happy with the way it's starting to flow. I think that overall, the book itself is probably going to be estimated to be about 28 chapters, if I had to guess. Okay, for our patrons only. Hello, patrons! This one says, can you share something specific that is going on in your story? Yes, so I think I told you how when I was working on chapter 3, it was about going to this place where you get to kind of experience the magic in person for the first time. And so now, after doing that, I am shifting over to, again, the characters and their relationships. And I've just been really trying to hone in on impossible choices and just kind of like conflicting desires. I'll get into that later. But so right now, chapter 4 is coming down to relationships between the people closest and how you can be friends or family, but you're always going to have tension. Like, I don't think I've ever gotten along with everyone 100%. Chapter 4 is kind of like, okay, how does everyone else think about that? Not just your main character. What do you think are your strengths as a writer, and what do you think is the strongest point of your book? So when I've had people beta read my work, I've been told that my biggest strength is world building and particularly painting a visual sensory image. I would say my strongest point of my book so far. My opening, I felt really strongly about that. It captures an attention, you get an idea of what the stakes are, who the character is, and kind of the reality of the situation they're living in. So I hope that I have made a prologue or a first kind of opening pages that immerses people enough to want to continue with the story. 4, what do you think is something you need to work on for your writing, and is there anything you know you're going to have to rework in your second draft? Yeah, dialogue. I struggle with dialogue. A lot of the times I'm reading scripts for like movies or TVs. I try to listen to the way dialogue kind of moves the story forward and making every word count. And I realize that's my weakest thing, because my initial thought is to kind of have the same sort of poetry that I want to paint with my visual world building. But when I go back to reread it, or when I go to finish a scene that I hadn't quite finished, and I come back and I'm like, this is so not how I would say that. And so I almost have to build the scene around it the way I want to, and then go back and do a dialogue recheck, because a lot of the times I get lost in the visual and kind of sensory details. So that's something I know I need to work on. And I think the best thing for me to do is to just get it out there right now as is. And then when I finish the chapter, I can go back and reread it and be like, all right, let's simplify, cut that. And finally, number 5, were there any moments of brain blockage, distractions, writer's block, what parts? Chapter 3, I actually struggled with a little bit, just because I was trying to describe an innate ability that someone feels towards utilizing this magic. And it's really hard, because I didn't want it to feel like there was something swelling up inside of her, or some magic she's calling, or anything like that, because that's not how it feels to me. The way it feels is kind of how, like, when I learned a second language, it was something that took time and work and effort and failure and like hardships on a lot of times, and embarrassment, and just really humbling you a lot over and over. But then at some point you reach a stage where you feel comfortable in it, and it feels natural, and you don't know why, you can't explain it exactly, but you can just slip into it without having to think about it anymore. It's just an innate sense you have. It's not like I'm summoning something inside me to speak another language. It's just, I just click into it. That took me a while, but I was really happy to reach that point. I felt really good about that. So yeah. And that's where we're at for week 3. Woo!
Hello, everybody. I am here to do my week 3 of NaNoWriMo No Mo Mofo update, and I have not done very well because life's been busy. But hey, it's the no press one, right? But let's go ahead and get started with some of these questions that Kayla has come up. Word count, daily amount. Since our last check-in, I think I have written about 1,000 words that I've kept. This response is going to be a deep dive into how I didn't meet my goals and why I'm okay with that. What did you tackle this week? I already wrote chapter 5, but I was going back to chapter 4 and writing it because what was chapter 4 is now chapter 5 because I realized a scene needed to be inserted to add some more backstory to my main character, Will. Kind of doing like a bit of a character work chapter and setting up his personal life because the ending I came up with that you saw recently was very much so going to depend on your emotional connection to the character. Now we have a Patreon only section. Can you share something specific that is going on in your story? I don't know jack about cars. I am not a car guy, but Will, the main character, is a bit of a car guy. He's a car goblin, and that was probably something I should have been spending time on with my draft too. But you know, when you have writer's block, you focus on things that maybe you shouldn't be focusing on right now. What do you think are your strengths as a writer? Right now, I think my strengths as a writer is I'm pretty good with characterizations in a blunt way. I like blunt characterization as long as it can be expounded upon for something more tactful. I think in the real world, people are pretty blunt with who they are a lot of the time. I feel like you should not only be able to get their character really fast, but you should also be able to get their relationship and character to other people really quickly. And so that's what I think especially in my chapter 1 and 2, have succeeded in, though I think narratively my chapter 2 is still kind of weak. What do you think is something you need to work on for your writing? I need to work on my ability to commit to research. This is one of the reasons I chose to do a legal drama fantasy story, which is still something I'm still kind of laughing at myself for committing to. But I am getting really held up when it comes to actually researching the legal side of where this story is going to find so much of its stakes. It's daunting. Is there anything you know you're going to have to rework in your second draft? Yeah, I've pretty much just guaranteed that I just managed to throw a card forward backward. I don't know how that just happened. I know I'm not going to get everything right on the legal side of things in the first draft, near right. I'm just hoping to get it in the ballpark so that way the narrative can make sense. Then I'm going to get real help from people with legal backgrounds to make it all make legal sense too. Were there moments of brain blockage, distractions, writer's block? What part? Yes to all of that, and it's all YouTube related. I have had a YouTube month for sure, where I've been focusing way more on content than writing. So that is where the big blockage comes in. Now, we're going to transition into week 4 super smoothly. Week 4. I do hope that while we're on the boat, I will be getting a lot of writing time in. I'm actually not going to bring my work computer, and I am going to bring my work iPad, because the iPad I can write on, and it feel okay. I can't like edit a video on an iPad, so it'll encourage me to, no matter what news drops, no matter what goes on in the fantasy space, to purely focus on this book. If every major fantasy author could watch this video and note to not release big fantasy news for about a week, that would be great. I'm going to try and actually get the rest of the book outlined. I am going to keep probably a lower word count because I want to just try and outline the rest of the book and specifically all the legal things that need to happen for me to get to the ending that I really want. What are your thoughts on this no press flexible approach? Thank God, because I think I've total written 10,000 words this month. It's not been a lot. So I think it's fantastic because otherwise I would be very disappointed with myself. Patrons only. Tips that worked for you. I think having like a comfortable writing software, a comfortable writing place, a comfortable writing mentality, and then just setting very small goals for yourself throughout your writing session is the best way to keep yourself moving, even if you have writer's block. I think the best way to overcome writer's block is if you're like, I don't know what to do with this scene. Well, okay, don't take it that far. What do you got to do with this paragraph? What do you got to do with this sentence? Or just plan. A lot of times writer's block is just because you haven't planned it out yet. So I have been having good progress, like especially with that emotional scene I just talked about. I didn't want to get there next paragraph, so I didn't worry about that. And I just kept writing, okay, what does Will do next? How does he handle this situation? Just going through the motions really helped keep the scene going. Biggest hurdles of writing. It's just been being a YouTuber on top of being a writer. I mean, my job doesn't demand all of my time. I have a pretty flexible schedule, but certain months, certain weeks, certain days certainly can just suck up all the energy from what I have in me. And so that's just been the big hurdle. And I love my job. Don't get me wrong. I'm not complaining about that in any way, shape, or form. It's just purely this last couple of weeks have been a lot of a commitment. So yay, that was my no press, no whoa, pie, po, pow, po update. Thank you so much for partaking in this, and extra double thank you to patrons and for everyone who bought merch in this last drop. I really appreciate that. And have a good one, y'all. Peace.
Hello, everyone. As I'm sure you've noticed, I am still rocking my early 2000s curly hair. But this is still the same day as the week 3 update. And the reason for that is I am so sorry, but we are leaving to go on vacation, and I realized we want to upload this video at the end of November. So I don't have time to film the rest of this segment before we go. So I just figured I would give you an update on what I had planned to talk about in our final day, week 4 check-in, but basically take that time to tell you what my experience with NaNoWriMo was. As you know, I haven't been able to update it, so my plan for Thursday and Friday when we're traveling is to really nail down Chapter 4, finish that up, and start skeleton outlining Chapter 5. Also, since we're going to be traveling for the next week with my family, we're hoping that during our downtime we'll also be able to just kind of pull back, set up shop somewhere, and do a little writing then. So my goal by the end of our vacation is to maybe get to Chapter 6. I know that's not a full book like normal NaNoWriMo, but for me, it's a really solid point that I'm going to be happy with. Biggest takeaway from doing NaNoWriMo. NaNoWriMo is and should be tailored to what works best for you. I don't think that I would have done as well in my head of what I consider to be great writing if I stuck to the traditional NaNoWriMo format of putting out a certain word count every day. I'm just glad that I took the no pressure approach because I found that that was a much more healthy relationship I had with my writing. But the whole challenge as a whole to like continue to be a part of your writing and constantly add to it and visit it and chat with it and build a relationship with it, I think is really great. And I love the fact that NaNoWriMo allowed me to do that. If you want to take part in NaNoWriMo, but not make it feel like homework, if that's not something that works for you, this is a great approach, and I hope you'll check it out. And then number 5, were there any moments of brain blockage, distraction, writer's block? The big thing this week is that we are going on vacation. My plan was to have one last check-in the last day of November, and then we put it out. But unfortunately, we're going to be gone, and that's really disappointing to me because I really wanted to give you guys the every 4-week check-in. Now, finally, I wanted to give patrons some last-minute things about our thoughts on NaNoWriMo because you have stuck through this entire video. I'm already editing it, and I'm at like an hour and 45 minutes worth of content that I've cut down. So I'm terrified how long this is going to be for you. But I figured just in case you were curious, some tips that worked for us as well as biggest hurdles we could talk about. Tips that worked for me, I really recommend going and checking out YouTube channels. I'm just going to throw out mine that I love to check into. There's one called Schnee. I think it's SCHNEE. They've put out a ton of videos about writing and building strong characters or story arcs, and their most recent one was 50 Lessons to Learn from the Arcane Writers. I also love watching Alyssa Matesic because she worked in trad publishing, and she talks about what she as an editor contributes and kind of helps me view things from a different perspective. I also love Abby Emmons, of course, Brando Sando's lectures, Shaylin writes, has been really great for me in terms of the technical aspects. I never went to school for writing, so being able to learn so much more about clarity, and not just as like the concept of clarity, but more in depth on how you can pinpoint it and certain techniques you can use. I think that's been really helpful for me. One of the biggest hurdles I had for writing, I know that one of the ways that I tell Daniel is that no feedback he gives me will ever hurt me, because I've probably already thought it about myself. So I can be very self-critical, which I think a lot of writers and artists and creatives are. It's been very difficult to have the confidence that people would be interested in the sort of story that I want to write. It's the same thing for me with merch. Like, if one person is just like, I don't really like this, I'm like, the whole merch line was awful. I think my biggest hurdle has been having the confidence to keep going with it, because I'm really excited about it. It's just so much of me doubts whether it's good enough. And that's been the greatest part about having Daniel for a partner to go through this with, because I feel like I'm getting very honest feedback, and it's not someone who's just trying to support me for the sake of being my partner. It's someone who is also a creator and who also knows how they want to get the most honest and helpful feedback possible. So those have been the questions that we have tried to tackle throughout all of November in NaNoWriMo. Once again, I am so sorry that we can't give you the complete full ending fourth week, because we will be gone. But for me, I just want to say thank you to everyone who has gone on this journey with us. I hope you enjoyed hanging out with me too, and I'd love to talk your works with you. I love talking with other people about their ideas. Let's chat. Anyway, I hope you guys have a great November and a wonderful start to your December. And yeah, see you soon.